We are officially the week before my birthday. What a way to start the episode. But today I'm really excited. I've got a really, really cool guest to share with you. And we're taking some big topics on in the world, which is always a good way to spend Friday, to start Friday afternoon, and to kind of get your brain thinking about what you're going to be doing next week. So today's guest popped up on my radar, I think on, I want to say Twitter. I could be wrong about this because let's face it, poddies, like how often am I actually on social media for a prolonged period of time? Yeah, it's not long. But this person first came to my attention because they were participating in some Twitter chats with some other people that I'm really interested in following. And I was really excited about this. You know, this particular person retweeted me a couple of times, and then I saw them on Instagram and I was like, oh, this is cool. And then when I was speaking at the Youpreneur Summit last November, I got really excited because this person was actually there, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is super cool. So little did I know that a few months later, just a few short months after speaking at Youpreneur and, you know, not tripping over my Louboutin heels in public, which also massive win, I get an email from this person's team saying, we would love to invite you to speak at this event in October 2019. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited because I love speaking at events. I love going to events. I love meeting people. I love meeting other speakers. I love going out for drinks inevitably on the nights after the event has actually happened. And it's just a really, really fun atmosphere. And so I was honored to be asked by today's guest, who is the wonderful Nichole Smith, to be a speaker at her Magic Maker Live event that's happening in October. So it is now just 1 month away. It's on October 15th and 16th in London. And guess what? I'm going to be on a stage not only with the incredible Nick Smith herself, but with Denise Duffield-Thomas, with Ashley Ambage, and with some incredible other speakers, including Janet Murray, a good friend of mine. So looking forward to catching up with Janet, having a beer together, hopefully. Having a glass of whiskey with Ash. And I'm not sure what Denise drinks, so maybe I'll have to figure out something healthy, kombucha type thing, unless she really likes wine, in which case I'm all over that too. So it will be, for me, a few days of speaking and having interesting conversations and hopefully drinking with some incredible people. And I'm very, very excited about that. But back to today's episode, I am super excited to welcome Nick to the show. Nick has had this incredible career, and we actually dig into some of the journey because it has been so phenomenal and it's been so different. What I really loved about this conversation actually was some of, I want to say some of the conversation, all of the conversation, obviously, but some of the pre-record as well, where we both got our groove on talking about pets. So a little known fact about Nick that you may not know if you haven't seen her around the internet before is that she used to own a $1 million dog brand. Okay, a dog lifestyle brand. We talk about it in the episode. And if you are somebody who loves dogs or cats or pets in general, if you are a petpreneur, then you're going to love this one because we actually dive into that, what that looked like, and why you should shut down a business that doesn't actually light you up. So it's a really, really interesting and intriguing conversation today. You'll hear all about the behind the scenes of this super cool event and how to get awesome keynote speakers to speak at your event. I don't know whether to say, like, spoiler, be awesome. Be awesome, awesome. But you will get to hear the behind the scenes about that. We're going to dive into the $1 million dog brand, what that really looks like. And we're going to talk about something that is really important and that's coming up a lot in the industry at the moment, which is brand versus business. Which should you have and why? So if you are intrigued by that, keep listening. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. And I can't wait to hear what you think on social media. Okay, poddies, how exciting is this? We're going to be talking all things dogs and branding and business, and it's just going to be epic. So chill with whatever you are doing, grab a pen and paper, and be prepared to meet the lovely Nick Smith. How are you, my love?
I am wonderful, thank you. And it's funny that you say the dog thing, because I've got my dog Pippa here and she's like circling around me. I'm like, don't make noise. So, she's a Frenchie. If we hear snuffles, like, it's her.
It's so funny because my podcast producer, Scott, he literally laughs every time that they produce an episode for me because Max, my chihuahua, refuses to be anywhere other than right next to the mic snoring.
Totally. Of course.
So
yes.
we literally have this thing where Scott has actually edited like tiny snippets of just Max snoring, and he's like, is this Max snoring or is this something else? So I'm with you on that front.
You're going to have to do like an outtakes of just dog noises.
I know. I'm not sure what that would sound like, dog or human. I'm so excited to have you on the show today, and I'm excited for many reasons. I'm excited to kind of dig into one of your core pieces around brands versus businesses. But I'm also excited because in just a couple of months' time, I'm going to be speaking at your amazing event, Magic Maker Live, which I'm so excited about because you've got incredible keynote speakers like Denise Duffield-Thomas, like Ashley Amberger, you've got Lisa Johnson. It's just going to be ridiculous. So tell us about that, because it takes a lot of steel ovaries to pull off an event to get some like keynote speakers that are the shiz. So tell us about Magic Maker Live. What is it? How did it come about? And, you know, how did you get these awesome people on stage?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And I'm so excited that you're going to be on that stage, because I was just talking to Lisa the other day and we were saying how there's this whole contingent of like slightly tell it like it is speakers and they don't always get invited to some of the other events because they're a little too tell it like it is. So she was like, this is the perfect event for me. So yeah, really, I call my tribe Enchanted Rebels. And I think that really describes the tone of the event. It's a marketing and grow your business conference, but with kind of for people who didn't sit at the popular table, if that makes sense. Like those of us who identify as a little bit different, you know, whether that's the way we look or the way we act or the jobs that we've chosen to pursue. Obviously, I come from this pet space, which we'll talk about, but you know, there's petpreneurs are a very unique type of entrepreneur, and you know, there's makers and artists. And I think the idea is having a really safe, interesting, tell it like it is space that is kind of filling a little bit of a gap in this whole marketing business event space, which I feel like is either, you know, too polished or a little bit too, you know, what I kind of call testosterone and caffeine fueled, a bit too high octane for a lot of the women in my group. So we're hoping to create this amazing space where we can come together, connect, do the work, to look at growing your business no matter where you're at now, because we have a core curriculum that's about growing your business, crafting a brand, growing a brand, and funding your freedom. So no matter where you're at, there's going to be someone great for you. And as you mentioned, we have these, I just can't believe the speakers that we have, you know, Denise Duffield-Thomas, Ash Amberger, as you mentioned, Lisa Johnson, you, Janet Murray, Ann Wilson, just this incredible stage of women who I think are going to be both really inspiring and really, you know, practical. We're going to walk away with so much actionable stuff. And if you come VIP, then we have this third day of masterminding, which I've added in because, you know, you always walk away from a conference like that with your head exploding. And I added that third day so we can make a plan with all the stuff that you've learned in the days prior, how you're going to implement it, what are the action items you're going to take forward, and how you're going to make the most out of it. Obviously, I know you talk a lot about return on investment, and it's important when you invest in anything for your business that you understand what your return is going to be. And I think taking that extra time can have a lot to do with making sure that, you know, it takes money to attend events and do continued education and make sure that that investment pays off.
100%. And I love that you said that, because I think the thing is with events, people can often get caught up with, you know, who they're going to see, but not necessarily what they're going to action from what they hear from that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a bit of a trap, isn't it? Because there is a lot to be said for being inspired. And, you know, the events that I've been to, I know I saw you at Yourpreneur last year. That's a great event. I love Tribe Live that is done by Stu McLaren. You know, some great events leave you buzzing, which has so much value for the energy you put back into your business, but they can also leave you a little overwhelmed. And, you know, you write like 2 full notebooks worth of stuff that then go in your desk drawer and you never look at again. So it's like, I think, you know, it's hard to have enough discipline to go home and to pick those 5 action items or whatever that you're going to move forward with. So I'm really excited that we're going to offer the space to do that together.
Well, I am so excited. And guys, if you do want to have a look at Magic Maker Live and whether you can make it, it's London in October. You will get to come and see me and Nick, and obviously the amazing keynote speakers we've talked about, who've all been on the podcast at some point or another. So go and check out their episodes if you want to hear a little bit more about who they are and what they're doing in the world. And make sure you hit the link in the show note. There's a really cool promo code in there as well. So you might even be able to get a little bit of a discount on a ticket. Have a look. I know. Very generous. Very generous. So I'm excited about this because you've obviously had a really interesting journey as an entrepreneur, and it's so funny for me because I think in this space we get so used to just seeing people who have never come from business before, people, you know, who are setting up businesses every single day, who are teaching other people how to build businesses. You know, there's been this huge thing around baby
Yeah.
business coaches and the pyramid scheme and blah blah blah. And what I love about you is that you had this really interesting journey into entrepreneurship. You kind of fell into it, but you created this supremely successful $1 million dog brand before you started in on the branding and business piece. So let's talk about that, because dogs are clearly everybody's best friend. You need to be a dog person or a cat person, like whatever, but an animal person. So how did that happen?
Great question. So I think, I have spent a lot of years working in the pet space. And one of the things that is really common over there is that everybody wants to jump into the pet industry because they have that one dog or that one animal that just changes their life. And then they want to build their whole life around helping other people, etc., helping other dogs. And that was true for me. When I was 19, as you do when you're a college student, I got a Great Dane puppy. Like she ate better than I did. I'm on like ramen and she gets this like crazy expensive dog food. But at the time I was going to school and I wanted to be a photographer, and I just sort of realized I was trying to find my niche at the time. I know you talk a lot about niching and I talk a lot about it too. It's so important. And I realized I didn't want to do weddings and I didn't want to do high school proms, So I decided to jump into pet photography. And at the time that was not a thing. It's quite popular now. As a job, but at the time that was not a job. And I was mentoring with a photographer who suggested it to me because she knew someone in San Francisco who was doing it. And I was like, yes, that's it. That's totally it. If I love my dog this much, there's got to be other people who love them just as much. So that decision struck this chain of events off, which led to me getting a business partner who is the woman I actually got my Great Dane puppy from, who had her brother. So we started off with this like LLC of Dane and Dane because we both had Great Danes. And what is really interesting about the journey right there is, again, I said, I'm a young, clueless college student. I have no money. I have student loans. Went into business with this gal who is a bookkeeper, right? So she does all the stuff I have no idea how to do. And we decided to open a retail space in conjunction with my photo studio as partners. So we signed on the line for like a $50,000 loan to work on trademark licensing to get a store full of retail product from a particular brand. And the long story short is, the day of opening came, we didn't have any stuff from them. And so we had to sue them.
Oh,
So
wow.
like our grand opening was the 5th of July. I'll never forget it. 5th of July, 2004. And we're like filing lawsuit papers instead of like celebrating the grand opening of this exciting new business. So that set off a 5-year drama, basically, of chalking up a lot of debt in legal fees and going down this gauntlet of, that whole legal route, which is awful, even when you are right, even when you're the one who's in the right. And basically what happened there is we won, but ultimately they filed bankruptcy. So I ended up with basically paying off this, high five figure debt for the next decade, essentially. And I had to just crack on. So that was like trial by fire. Every like cent I made went to like pay our rent and pay our legal fees. And so I got a really interesting education in that really early on. But that led me to do some other risk-taking things, probably because I'm like, well, screw it. Like, it doesn't get worse than this. So, like it was easy to kind of jump from there and do big things. And one of the big things is I met my business partners for a brand called Dog is Good not long after I launched that first business. And we decided to go into business together. I did the product design and the logo and the photography and all the marketing and copywriting and web design and stuff for this brand of gear for dog lovers, basically like t-shirts, hats, mugs, this great lifestyle brand, which again was something that didn't really exist at the time. It's kind of hard to imagine now because there's so many of them now. But when we were looking around, there was like, the t-shirts with the watercolor portrait of the golden retriever on it. That's like all you could wear if you liked dogs. And both my partner and I were like a little more stylish than that. And we're like, we can do better. So we launched that in like around 2005. And so what I ended up doing is basically growing 2 businesses at the same time, a local service-based business doing photography and design, because I was also a graphic designer. And then this manufacturing business, which ended up moving to California, and I was in Seattle. So we were in 2 different states running 2 different businesses. And having this massive debt to pay off from the beginning. So I would say I had a pretty rough go of it in terms of what entrepreneuring means, but was able to really turn it around. So I ended up working with tons of entrepreneurs as well as billion-dollar brands on the pet side of things as a service-based business. So I do commercial photography, and I was doing graphic design for some of these big firms. And then on the flip side, we really managed to grow Dog is Good into a huge brand. It's still a huge brand, and growing and growing and growing in the States. So that's been, obviously that's really exciting. But then I ended up moving to the UK. I met my husband, moved to the UK, needed to get a visa, and was like, hey, you know what? I dropped out of college to start my first business. Maybe I should get a degree. And I was able to test into a master's program. So I went from having no degree. I did like 4 years towards my bachelor's, but never finished. No degree, to jumping into a master's program at one of London's top business schools, and did a master's in marketing. And that was really when it started to kind of pull all the pieces together for me. And I realized that I'm a marketing strategist. The stuff that I do is marketing strategy, and that my skills as a photographer and a graphic designer actually really contributed to my ability to really understand what people think and how to convey that in a visual or tangible way, which helps me really, my superpower is kind of helping people find their why and help them decide if it's a viable business opportunity, and then kind of create the communications that they need to attract people based on what they're passionate about.
So I really like that, because I think the thing with marketing as a word now, and it's the same with sales, and I think it's the same with mindset and probably any of the kind of buzz jobs, let's say, on that, is that they're such big words. They're so blue sky now that, I can say sales and people are like, oh, so are you passive income? Are you funnels? Are you this? Are you that? And it is the same in the marketing industry. I love that you've put it in a tangible way. It's about helping people get the communications to make sure that, their audience actually knows what they're doing, and is ultimately generating the leads that they want. But that's inherently quite difficult, isn't it? When
Yes.
we're in the saturated market that we are, which is, we're all honest here, it's a good thing. If you've got competition, it means that they're selling something. Yay, we like that. But how is marketing changing? Because it seems to me, and I mean, I've only been in the online space for the last 5 years, but it seems that the marketing is shifting at a very rapid rate right now, and people have always been keen to jump on the next bandwagon. For the last 2 years, we've had Periscope. Thankfully, that's died a death. Not a top fan. We had like the Snapchat era. We've had lots of different things coming up. So how can we, I don't know, future-proof our marketing? Is there anything that people can be doing?
Well, I'm a huge believer in a couple of things that I think are starting to trend. One is getting much more serious about relationship building in a real way. And part of that is I think there's going to be a big swing back to in person. That's certainly something I'm doing in my business. That's part of why I'm holding this conference, is I feel like we spend so much time behind a screen that we forget, especially when you think about sales, we forget that we can just go to coffee shops and leave flyers. We forget that we can go to events and talk to people. We're so obsessed with optimizing our Facebook ads that we're like, oh yeah, I could just walk out the door and go talk to the local businesses that, could maybe recommend me. So I think as this digital, I always feel like there's a pendulum swing, right? So we've had so many pendulum swings in the digital space. I think there's got to be some back into a bit more in person and analog. And you see that like even with photography, for example, digital, and now everyone's buying, medium format film cameras and shooting with film because they're just so sick of, digital photography being, everywhere. So I think for me, the thing that I'm really passionate about is I help entrepreneurs find freedom and fulfillment by building brands instead of just businesses. So for me, it's not just about marketing and it's not just about business. I mean, I want you to have a successful business, but if it blows up your life, what is the point, right? If you lose all your relationships and your health. So I am hugely against that sort of 24/7 hustle mentality. I hate it. I call it out anywhere I see it because I think it's just wrong. I think it's unhealthy. I think it's bad for people, bad for the planet. I just don't like it. And so my stance is very different from that. And it's like a business is only worth building if it's going to make your life better and if it's going to make the world better, and I think my belief is that it's these, change-making entrepreneurs who are going to save us. It's certainly not going to be our politicians, right? So I think those of us who have a cause and can build a business around it, meaning that we can have it support us in a way that we're comfortable and we can sustain. We don't have to just donate our time and be poor and stressed, that we can build wealth, build a profitable business around a cause that we care about, and then create real change. I think that is what's going to save us, I think. So I am so dedicated to helping people do that. And that for me, if you're going to do that and you kind of bring it back to marketing, you've got to be able to connect it with something you really care about, which is where the branding piece comes in. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sustain. You're just going to give up because entrepreneurship is so hard, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I think it's so interesting, especially the point you've brought up there about the being in person and that disconnect happening. It's funny because I recorded an episode on it not so long ago on the podcast about the question of, are we so hyper connected that we're actually disconnected from other people?
Totally.
Like,
yes.
It's so easy to communicate online now that actually most people avoid human contact and real conversation. And that terrifies me as a salesperson. You know, I grew up in a sales world where you had to get on the phone and you had to talk to people. And now I say that to some of my clients and they're like, oh my God, get on the phone. What? Like, are you sure? And you know, it's always interesting to me because we do now have this generation of like young people. I use that term loosely, turning in a month. But we have a generation of young people now who they've never experienced a landline. They've never had to wait for the phone to be free for them to call somebody else. They've never had to get on the phone. And as a result, they're not necessarily the most well-rounded individuals. They find it a real struggle to communicate in person, and they prefer to communicate by text, by email, on Facebook, on social media. And I think that's really scary because we're removing the human elements of our business. And ultimately, humans are pre-programmed to want to spend time with other people. We're social creatures, and in embracing so much technology, we've always discounted the fact that we need that social interaction to survive.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what's really interesting, you know, both you and I work with entrepreneurs fairly exclusively. And what's interesting is I've seen what I will refer to as the rise of the introvert, where, you know, no one was talking about being extroverted or introverted like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden, I feel like so many people in my audience, I'd be curious if it's the same for you, identify as introverts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think most of us probably are a mix, right? Things make us feel a little bit shy and insecure, and things make us feel a bit excited and give us energy. And I think that is, you know, so that, you know, worst case scenario being to get on the phone, that's, you know, something that people identify as being a characteristic of being an introvert. But I think it's just being nervous about putting yourself out there, which we all have, you know, it's hard. It's hard to do cold calls. That's why most of us don't take jobs that require it. But I think the other flip side of what you're talking about, this rise in technology, is that it makes becoming an entrepreneur so much easier, right? The barriers to entry to starting a business are basically nothing now. And I think that's good, like you say, in terms of keeping us all on our toes. And I think it's difficult because so many people end up just starting a business or taking, you know, an online course that tells them how to do the first 5 steps of starting a business. And then they're just lost because either they figured out really quickly and they have, you know, just happen to have a natural skill set that makes them good at marketing or selling themselves, and they experience some growth. And then there's nowhere to go, you know, after the low hanging fruit. It's like, oh crap, now what? And so I think that younger generation is experiencing that. And I think you know, I work with a slightly older generation as well. And I think they're really intimidated by the technology because it's so easy for the younger generation to use. And so you've got people running really analog businesses, especially local service-based businesses, people who are, you know, on the ground doing things one-on-one with people in their community. And they don't know how to use Facebook to grow their business, or they don't know how to improve their SEO. And, you know, the flip side is the person who only exists online and sells digital courses and has only ever had passive income. It's a really interesting time, I think, to talk about entrepreneurship because there's so many different types of entrepreneurs out there. But my belief is this idea of building a brand is it really crosses over and kind of pulls those worlds together to add, you know, more meaning, and also the ability to charge more and be more sustainable, because as you've mentioned, these worlds that we're growing in are really saturated. Certainly the pet industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, becoming very, very saturated. And when you get to that place, then the need to build a brand instead of just a business just, you know, quadruples basically.
So I love that you've brought up the barrier to entry thing, because as every poddy knows, this is one of the things that just gets on my wick constantly. And actually it's something really interesting because John Lee Dumas, I don't know whether you were were you at the first year of Youpreneur as well, 2017?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so John Lee Dumas spoke 2017 Youpreneur, and he said this thing that really stuck with me, and it was go 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep. And after I saw him there, I was like, right, I have to have him on the podcast. And when he came on the podcast, we talked about this barrier to entry, and he believes that one of the reasons that Entrepreneur on Fire has become so successful over the years is because he started with something that was high barrier to entry. He was like, everyone was doing, Facebook groups, and everyone was able to do ads, and everyone was able to do all this kind of stuff, but not everybody was able to put on a daily podcast and have the kind of mentality to make that happen and the perseverance to go out and get the guests and things. And I really love that. I think, that the online space has become so low barrier to entry that actually it can be difficult as a consumer because you're not necessarily sure who to buy from. It's possible for everybody now to take a nice photo with a camera phone, and to say good things about themselves. And I think it makes it also quite difficult as somebody trying to build your own brand, because like you say, brand versus business, they're very different entities. And ultimately it's the people who want to build a brand, who want to build something that is scalable, that is going to be successful over time, that's going to remain successful over time. I think you call it sustainable competitive advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this idea that you're building something that is there for the long haul to last. Whereas I think what a lot of people are doing now is actually trying to just build a quick win business. They're like, right, okay, can I make 6 figures in 6 months and go on some first class flights? And that is
so true.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone's there. Everyone's in Paris. Everyone's got the Eiffel Tower behind them. And
well, that again is a symptom of social media, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's comparison that's doing that.
But this is the thing, and it really, really, I don't know, it gets my goat, because you effectively, what people are doing is just creating the same business again and again and again, and they're not thinking about how they're going to create their own sustainable competitive advantage in the market. They're just thinking about the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year at a push. And actually, when you think in that level of like short term, yeah, it can be good for things like cash injections. If you need to make a ton of money quickly, great, like that's fine. Thinking about the next 3 months is cool. But actually, when you're thinking about a business that's going to, pay you for the next 5 years and potentially pay employees and a team and things like that, you've got to be thinking longer term, and you've got to be thinking about how you're going to be building your reputation and all of those kinds of things. I mean, what is it for you that you think goes into a brand versus a business, like in terms of the practical elements?
Oh, that's my favorite question. So, especially when you do any kind of degree in marketing, what you're basically taught is how the brand is an asset that a business owns, right? So, and that's often true. So you look at Coca-Cola or Apple, the brand is on the balance sheet, probably the most valuable part of that business, right? It's almost unquantifiable, the value of the Coca-Cola or the Apple brand. And in that case, what we're talking about really is sort of the reputation of this business based on its name, word mark, advertising, what people know and think about it, basically. That's almost impossible to put a dollar amount on. Mm-hmm. But they do, don't they? Because they're some of the most profitable companies in the world. So my attitude towards branding is really different. And that is that instead of a brand being something that a business owns, when I define it, I just write it on paper as human plus business equals brand. So I feel like business is actually part of a brand rather than the other way around. And that a brand is bigger than you and it's bigger than your business, but it's a really important combination of the two, because brands that do it really well, the brands that we're really drawn to, act human, right? Mm-hmm. They talk to us like people. They do really interesting, funny things. They are compassionate to us. They give us that no haggle discount, no haggle returns, like Nordstrom's, this great brand in America. You can literally bring anything back at any time, even if you've worn it, even if it's got holes in it, and they'll give you a refund or an exchange. And they're famous for that. And people have brought back things that weren't even sold there, and they'll take them. It's amazing. And that's just part of how they've built their brand, right? Their reputation. So I think for me, when you talk about the difference between a business and a brand, it's hugely down to that acting human piece. When I talk about it from the entrepreneur side of why you would want a brand instead of a business, is that a brand is that combination of business and humanity. And so it makes it much more difficult to compete with, as you mentioned, the sustainable competitive advantage. Because you're not just selling widgets, and you're not just selling widgets at the cheapest price. You're selling why you do what you do. You're selling a mission, you're selling values, you're selling a shared enemy or a shared purpose. You're connecting with the humanity and other people, and that is why they buy from you. rather than, the bullet points of, the features or benefits of your product. The other thing that's really important about a brand, and the analogy I use is a little bit of like building a room versus building a house, is when you build a business based on a product. So I'm a dog trainer, or I'm a yoga instructor, or I'm a photographer and I have a photography business or a yoga business. It doesn't leave you a lot of room to expand. And if there's one thing I know about entrepreneurs is we get bored and we like to do different stuff. So if you start, so I see this a lot. I'll use the pet example because I've seen it a lot. I start as a dog trainer, and then I want to also offer dog photography, and I want to also sell pet products. But because everyone knows me as a dog trainer and my website is, something dogtraining.com, I have to almost start separate businesses to be able to incorporate my new interests. Whereas if you build a brand from the beginning and what you're talking about and marketing isn't dog training, it's why you're a dog trainer, right? I believe that all dogs are sentient beings and deserve to have the best possible life or whatever. Then you can sell anything as long as it's towards that end, right? As long as it meets that why. And that's the bit where I come in, and that's where kind of my genius is helping you find what that thing is that you care about, and then identify the most opposite pieces of what you want to sell and make them make sense together. So I know that sounds a little bit vague, but I have worked with a lot of people in the pet space. For example, there's a gal who is really into yoga and is a pet photographer. And she in no universe did she think she could combine these two things into one brand, right? That sounds a little bit crazy. But what we did in the work was discover that her passion for these things came from the same place, and that the people who would hire her as a yoga instructor and hire her as a photographer were the same people. And it's because of a shared interest in being more connected with self and being more connected with nature and being more connected with, their animals. All of this stuff came from the same place. And so she's building a brand based on connection rather than pet photography or yoga. And as you can see, if she can sell to the same person and she can build around something bigger than herself and bigger than a product, then she's got miles and miles to grow into that in terms of, she could hold retreats or she could sell physical products that all reach that same idea of being more connected to self, connected to nature, connected to, your pets. And so the brand thing, although it's hard because it's obviously very vague when I talk about it, it's really about being able to get something from within you that you care about deeply and being able to create a business that allows you to talk about that stuff you're passionate about. That becomes your marketing. So my definition of marketing is simply just starting conversations and getting conversions. Like, it's so simple. People overcomplicate it, overwhelm themselves. But it's so much easier to start those conversations if you're talking about something you care about, right? Whereas if you're just selling this passive income thing and you don't actually care about the thing, it's so hard to do that marketing and sustain it long term, as you say.
Well, that's the thing. You just end up getting bored of it and you don't really care anyway. Max is obviously sat here nodding his head along at dogs things that we have to look after. He's like, yeah, I can get on board with that.
Jokes, mom.
Yeah. He's like, I would like me some of that, but not the dog training. Thank you.
Definitely not the training. Yes.
Just the sweet.
Just the luxury products, please.
Exactly. That's all he's interested in. So I guess the thing is, when we're considering all of this stuff, and I agree, everybody does make marketing much harder than it needs to be. And people make sales much harder than it needs to be because inherently we're human. We like to find the most complex solution to a problem. It wouldn't be worth solving if we didn't have to work at it, right? So I guess the question from me is, when we look at how can we make our marketing simple, is it really as simple as how can we best communicate to our audience in the way that we enjoy with a message that we're genuinely passionate about? Is that what we're preaching now with the rise in authenticity and all this kind of stuff?
I have a love-hate relationship with the word authenticity, and I'm sure
I do too.
Yeah.
Buzzword.
Because it is a buzzword, but it's the best word to describe exactly what you're talking about. And I believe that, yes, I agree with you. And for a couple of reasons that aren't just as straightforward. One is I am really passionate about trying to make marketing easy, fun for people, which, when I speak and I do workshops and stuff and I start the day saying, who here hates marketing? You're going to like it by the end of the day. They're like, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure I am. But partly it's marketing. Everything in your business that leads to revenue is marketing, period. So if you're not marketing, you're not making revenue. And the only reason a business exists is to make money. You exist for other reasons. A brand exists for other reasons, but a business sole purpose is to make money. So if you're not marketing, you're not making money, you have a hobby, basically, a really expensive, time consuming, stressful hobby. So what that means really is that we need to be looking at how to make it easy for ourselves to make it sustainable, just like anything, right? If we're going to be running a marathon, we have to pace ourselves. And then the flip side of it is that marketing, effective marketing, which I'm sure you talk about, is about creating emotional connections with people, right? It's not about appealing to the information side of their brain. It's about appealing to the emotion. And that is what causes people to make decisions. That's the behavior sort of center of the brain. And so what we need to be doing is to connect with people emotionally. And when we look at our widget and we're like, how can I connect with you emotionally about this thing? We kind of try and build these like stories around this thing. And that is sometimes hard and doesn't feel authentic. So it doesn't connect and it's not effective. Whereas if we can deeply understand for ourselves why we got into this in the first place, and we spend our time communicating that, then people want to buy from us. They will go to our sales page and they will find something to buy from us because they want to do business with us because they like us. And I know that sounds a little bit fluffy, but it's true. That's how it works. So the flip side is both, it's easier for people to buy from you. It's easier to charge more because people are fueled by desire rather than price comparison. And it's easier to sustain yourself in business because you're just waking up every day talking about the shit you love. It's like, that is what you do. And, I'm not saying there aren't practical things that need to go into marketing or into copywriting or into conveying the value, proposition, and all that stuff is true. But I believe it is as simple as find something that you are deeply passionate about, and you can build a business or businesses that connect to that, and just simply talk about why you're passionate about it and the change you want to make in the world, and you will be fine.
I really love that. And I really love how you've broken that down. I think, the key thing there is you should be talking about your product or services all the time because, ultimately you should be really proud of what you've created. And I think that's what we hear quite a lot, especially on the sales side, is that people are like, I don't want to talk about it all the time because people might think that's sleazy or pushy or whatever. But the reality is it's not sleazy or pushy to enjoy what you do and to be talking about it from that perspective.
Such a great point. I think, there's two things I want to add to that. One is it's so much easier to talk about what you sell if you're talking about the transformation that you want to create for people, right? Yeah. So first of all, you have to understand that transformation, which is where people like you and me come in, because we can really help people clarify that and help steer them to people who can help them communicate it if that's not their genius. So when you're talking about why you do what you do and why you care about the transformation that you create for your clients, people will buy your stuff. You don't have to talk about the course or the product or the retreat or whatever, because those are just, proof and parts of the journey towards this transformation. And if they want that transformation, they'll buy whatever is the right fit for them at this point in their journey. The flip side of it that I didn't mention, which is super, super, super important, is it's not just find your passion and build a business around it. That's a recipe for disaster. It's find your passion and also find something that people want and are willing to pay for, and find where those things cross over and build a business around that. So I spend a lot of time, telling people that their brilliant ideas are not viable.
And
and
a horrible position to be in, by the way, guys. When you do come to a coach and they say, no, that's not going to be the best idea you've ever had, it's not because they want to rain on your parade. It's that they're saving you the years of heartache and money and time that you will put into something that will not work.
Totally. And I think the important thing about that too is it's not just that people, the ideas I see that I say don't do that are either it's too complicated or, I just don't see a market for it. But the flip side is if it's not a good fit for you. So I've had the experience of building a business that I ended up getting rid of after like 2 years, even though I spent a ton of money on it. It felt like a total failure at the time because it was a beautiful, gorgeous, pretty successful business that I didn't want. And I didn't realize I didn't want it until I was about a year in. And that's the other thing. And that's this whole finding your why thing is I believe that our most valuable resource is our time. And when you make all that money and you get all that fame and like, that's the only thing you're going to want and want more of that you can't buy back at that point. And so I think it's really important we acknowledge that every step of the way on our journey and we don't wish it away. but also that we get very, very clear on how we like spending our time, and that our business exists to support us and not the other way around. And it should be supporting us in spending our time in the ways that we want. So that usually goes two ways. Either I'm building a business so I make a ton of money so I can cash out and spend my time the way I want, or I'm building a business where in that business, I get to spend my time exactly the way I want. So I can run this business forever because I love it. And I think obviously I'm a fan of the second one because it's more sustainable and you don't have this miserable imbalance thing going on, and you're just loving every day when you wake up. And that's hard, right? As you mentioned, when I work with people, I'm finding their why, whether that's like, I have a small course where people can kind of DIY it, or I do one-on-one stuff, which is a lot more intense. But either way, it usually takes people like a year to 2 years to like really figure it out, dial it down, understand it for themselves, find the thing that's perfect for them, and be able to communicate that and have a brand built around it. It is not a fast thing. And so as you say, with these quick win, these quick cash things, like that is not what we're talking about here. This is a totally different thing. And to be honest with you, for most entrepreneurs, it's something they do a little bit later on in their journey, because you have to know yourself and you have to know who you want to work with. And you have to probably have had some failures and mistakes to know what you don't want. And that's where this work comes from, is being able to optimize.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. Seriously, this has been an absolute flipping gold mine. And I'm so excited because I'll get to listen to your talk at Magic Maker Live as well. So selfishly, I'm like, well, hey, this is great.
It's going to be such a cool room.
Scribbling notes. So thank you, honestly, for coming on. It's been absolutely epic. And I know that there'll be a lot of poddies here who want to follow you. Where is the best place for them to find more Nick?
Absolutely. So in the socials on Instagram, I'm at Nichole Smith, and Nichole has an H in it. So it's JNICHOLE Smith. And same as the website, jnicholesmith.com are probably the two best places. I also have a podcast called the Magic Maker Podcast, and we talk about a lot of this branding stuff and a little bit of the magical elements that go into mindset and being an entrepreneur and believing in magic.
Very, very exciting. And if you do follow Nick on Instagram, just be aware that when she does inevitably pop into your inbox, it will come up as an archived or one of those request type things, because we all know how technologically challenged I am. Apparently, sometimes I don't even receive message requests for like 5 months. So apparently you messaged me after Upreneur, didn't see it until 2 days. I was like, oh,
lovely.
Yeah. Good on Instagram, just trying to
keep so helpful.
There you go, guys. If you have enjoyed today's episode, which I'm sure you have, make sure that you head over onto social media and let us know what your key takeaway was from today. It's always good to know when we're hitting the mark. And again, if you are interested in getting more Nick in your life, make sure you head over to her website, over to follow her on Instagram. We've got all the links in the show notes for you. And if you are interested in heading over to Magic Maker Live, make sure you check out that link in the show notes too. I will be back on Monday and see you for another episode.